Hi, and welcome to the Yesterday Show. Today, I'm your host, Austin Ragland. Today, we're going to talk about the top 10 presidents in U.S. history. You know them, you love them. Now, let's find out why. Author for his piece, The Declaration of Independence, and the first student in AP US History, AP Test History, to make a 6 on the AP test, JT Trury. Nice to see you, Thomas.
Thank you.
You as well, JT. Nice to see you.
TJ, JT.
All right. So, Thomas, let's start off by telling me a little bit about your writing, The Declaration of Independence.
Super good.
Well, you see, contrary to common belief, I was not the only one to write it. My former best friend, and then enemy, and then best friend again when we died like an hour apart from each other in the same room on the same day, July 4th. He also wrote the Declaration of Independence with me, my best-selling piece, as you already commented. So that was just, we had had enough with England. King Henry just wasn't listening to us. And yeah, that's what I said, King George. JT, please listen.
I'm sorry.
So,
Just know my stuff.
it was 1776, we had had enough. We had sent him multiple letters trying to fix the problem, and the Continental Congress decided that I, your third president, Thomas Jefferson, should write a letter and break up with England.
I see.
Oh, were there tears?
All right. And JT, can you tell me a little bit about the Louisiana Purchase?
Well,
Let me get this, TJ. The Louisiana Purchase was one of the most amazing expansionist ideas from Thomas Jefferson. Because Napoleon, the Emperor of France, was losing money through all of his wars, we decided to buy all that land from him, and because of that, we were able to double the size of the United States, and through the Northwest Ordinance, we were able to create more states, and thus expand our great nation.
Very controversial, but it worked out very well in the end.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I sent out Lewis and Clark, the amazing explorers. And
You did, JT?
I sent out Lewis and Clark.
Oh, sorry.
TJ sent
I always get myself mixed up. My bad.
It's the initials. It's the JT, TJ.
Yeah.
I sent out Lewis and Clark, and they explored the territory. We were hoping to find a waterway west, hopefully connect us to the Pacific. Unfortunately, we never did, those dang Rocky Mountains. But they did reach the west coast, and they explored all that land for us.
All right, and is there anything that either of you would like to add to end up this segment?
Well, I'd just like to talk about the Barbary War, in which I had to dispatch the Navy to get rid of, let's keep it PG, the pirates in Tripoli who were raiding our ships. And I used swift and decisive military action to put an end to the pirate threat. Also, I'm a huge believer in small government, agriculture, and I have faith in the common man to choose right over wrong.
All right, and that wraps it up for us here. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
TJ.
And
JT.
JT, you seem like a very swell and promising young man.
Congratulations on your 6, JT. And next up on the Yesterday Show, today, we welcome America's number 4 overall best president in U.S. history, the man who was elected 4 times, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
It's Delano.
Delano? Oh, sorry about that.
No worries.
And we also welcome Dr. Cornelius Cottonwood.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Cornelius. All right, so let's start off. Let me just ask you, Franklin, can you tell me a little bit about your World War II successes?
Absolutely. So when World War II had broken out, when Germany invaded Poland, us as Americans, we had learned from our mistakes in World War I, and we decided that we wanted to become more isolationistic.
Isolationist.
Exactly. And so through the Atlantic Charter and also the different neutrality acts, we were able to decrease munition sales and arms sales, but eventually through the Lend-Lease bill, we were able to rent those out to our allies, even if they didn't have any of the monies.
All right. And now let me ask, either of you can take this question. can you tell me a little bit about President Roosevelt's New Deal policy?
I have this, Mr. President.
All right.
So, when Roosevelt took over, tons of people were living in Hoovervilles. The previous president was ineffective, to say the least. So Roosevelt took over and instituted sweeping reform. Just sweeping is the only way to describe it.
So not like the vacuum, but the
Not
sweep.
the vacuum, but the sweep.
I see.
Yes, thank you, Austin. So he provided jobs for thousands, if not millions of unemployed people, brought food back to tables. He helped the American economy to recover. It was slow, but it was a recovery, and that is what we needed. He had plans like the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is actually, believe it or not, still in effect today in 2017, and then the WPA, or Works Progress Association. Through all of these, he provided jobs for unemployed people on things like infrastructure, conservation, manufacturing, all the things a country needs to go round.
All right, and that's going to wrap up y'all's time on the show today. Thank you for joining me on the show today. Nice to see you, President
Thank you
Roosevelt.
for having us.
You as well,
It's
Dr.
been a pleasure.
Atwood. Let's everybody give a warm welcome to the number 3 president in U.S. history, Honest Abe Lincoln.
It's Abraham Lincoln. Sorry.
Abraham and General Ulysses S. Grant.
Mr. President, looking very tall today.
Good to see you, Mr. President.
All right, and let's kick this off.
I mentioned my Emancipation Proclamation. It ended slavery in all the Confederate states, and it made it possible for the 13th, 15th, and 14th Amendment to be passed.
In that order, 13th, 15th, and 14th? Or-
Exactly, yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. All right, and I'm looking a little slumpy over there, Ulysses.
He's just very tall. It makes me look shorter by comparison.
You see, that's why I'm glad I have this tall chair. All right, Ulysses, can you tell me a little bit about the Civil War and your efforts and President Abraham Lincoln's efforts?
All right. Well, the Civil War, as you know, was fought between the northern and southern states over slavery and states' rights. And I was not the first general, but I was the most effective one. He had many generals before me. None of them were as good as I was. That's why I became the president soon after Mr. Lincoln. And it really took a turn for the better when I ended the war at Appomattox Courthouse, where I hounded Robert E. Lee like a dog and brought him to justice to face his crimes for leaving the Union.
Through the leadership of President Lincoln?
I was able to guide you to use the decisions, yes.
Sure.
All right, and that's going to wrap it up for you guys today. Thank you for coming on my show, President Lincoln and General Ulysses.
Thank you. Thank you.
And as we count down on our list and approach number 2 on the top U.S. presidents in U.S. history, audience, let's give a warm welcome to the first OG president of the United States, George Washington, and A- history student, Lauren Parrish.
Gee wizard.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to see you, Lauren.
So before we start, I just have one question.
Sure.
Was Washington, D.C. named after you?
She doesn't know this. Oh my.
Also, is Genghis Khan a real person?
I can see why you have the minus by your A in this class.
All right.
All right, let's get this kicked off. So, George, would you like to tell me a little bit about your role in the Revolutionary War?
Yes, so you see, through my wonderful experience during the French and Indian War, I was chosen by the Continental Congress to lead our men and our freedom fighters into the Revolutionary War. And through the wonderful, the aid of France, we were able to defeat them at the Battle of Yorktown, the Brits.
I see. And Lauren, is there anything you'd like to add on to this?
I'd just like to talk about his domestic policy as president with the Whiskey Rebellion. When they passed that whiskey tax, and he had to send the army to put down the rebellion, which would not have been possible under the Articles of Confederation. But under the new Constitution, in which we elected Papa George to be the president, he could put down the rebellion.
I see.
You know that, but you don't know Washington, D.C. was named after Washington? All right, all right.
All right, and before we say farewell to you guys today, would you like to comment a little bit on your farewell address?
Yes.
George?
So in my farewell address, I appointed two wonderful principles. One was isolationism, and the other was
Tough word.
political parties. Through isolationism, we were able to not meddle in with the affairs of Western Europe and be able to keep ourselves safe. And through political parties, with my cabinet members, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, they were always quarreling with one another. And through keeping only one nation without two political parties, we're able to keep the unity and be safe in all that we do.
All right, and thank you guys for coming on the show today. It's been
Thanks
a
for
pleasure to
having
have
us.
you. See you, George.
So
See you, Lauren.
Washington, D.C. was really named after you.
Yes,
they didn't
it
just
was.
make
Oh
that
my
up.
God. How did you not know this?
And last but very not least on our show today, let's give a warm welcome to the #1 U.S. president in U.S. history, President Ronald Reagan, and history teacher / expert, Mr. Dykema. Nice to see you.
Hey guys, great to be here.
All right, so let's start off. I have a question for you, Mr. Dykema. Can you tell me a little bit about President Ronald Reagan's domestic policy?
Oh yeah, totally. So before President Reagan took office back in 1980, the country was in economic slump, recession. Yes.
Stagflation.
Stagflation. Yes, and
Oh, big
through
word.
Reagan's Reaganomics, wordplay.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
Yeah, he was able to take us out of that economic recession. He also cut taxes and made his campaign one of optimism, and was able to help the moral majority get him into office.
All right, and now this one is for you, President Reagan. Can you tell me a little bit about your role in the Cold War?
Well, you see, Jimmy Carter, bless his heart, and
He tried so hard,
He
but
tried
he
so
just-
hard, but he just couldn't get everything to work right. And Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, they had all been practicing a policy of détente, or détente, if you pardon my French. And they tried to just not interact with the Soviet Union in any controversial ways and just hope the problem goes away. I, however, did not buy into this theory. I believe that if we want to beat the Soviet Union, we must take the fight to them. And as such, I built up our military forces, which caused the Soviets to do the same. And because our economy was stronger, thanks to Reaganomics, we were able to outdistance the Soviets. We even tricked them with the Star Wars program, which wasn't really going on that much, but they thought it was, so they spent a ton of money. And we did that. And then I'd like to toot my own horn a little bit here and talk about the Iran hostage crisis, and how the day I was elected, the Iranians released our hostages after 400 days.
Getting stuff done on day one.
On day one. All this talk about the first 100 days, I was first day. And then I helped bring down the Berlin Wall when I gave my speech saying, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. And it really helped to end the Cold War.
I see. And that is why you are #1
Number
president
one.
on our list.
Reagan.
And before we leave, I just have one last thing to say. As an actor myself, I have to say, y'all's screenplay, Let's Ride, the story of Paul Revere, was excellent, had the perfect amount of information. It was funny. Any more info would have just ruined the whole thing.
The perfect balance.
Exactly.
All right, and that's going to conclude it. Thank you for coming on our show today, President Reagan. You as well, Mr. Dykema.
If I were grading this, I would give it a 100.
I see. Thank you for your input. All right, and that was our last guest on the show today. Thanks everybody for tuning in and watching the top presidents in U.S. history. Signing off, your host, Austin Ragland.